Maya Rodriguez adjusted her ring light one final time, flashing her signature peace sign at her phone's camera. Don't forget to like and follow for more daily content, fam. Her livestream counter showed 50,000 viewers when the screen suddenly went black. She tapped the phone, expecting another app crash, but nothing happened. "Mom," she called out, "is the Wi-Fi down again?" The silence that followed made her stomach twist. Not even the usual hum of the air conditioning filled the air. Through her bedroom window, she watched her neighbor's Tesla roll to a stop in the middle of the street. Maya grabbed her dad's old camcorder from the closet, the one he insisted on keeping because sometimes old tech is the best tech. She teased him about it last Christmas, but now her hands trembled as she loaded a fresh tape. The viewfinder flickered to life, and she pressed record just as the sky turned crimson. The massive ships emerged like sharks breaking through a blood-red ocean above Los Angeles. Their surfaces rippled with strange patterns that made her eyes hurt if she looked too long. Maya zoomed in, capturing every detail as more portals opened across the horizon. Her social media instincts kicked in. Frame the shot, maintain steady hands, narrate clearly. It's 3:42 p.m. Pacific time. She spoke into the microphone, her voice surprisingly calm. All electronic devices appear to be disabled, except for this camera. I'm documenting what looks like. She swallowed hard. An alien invasion. Across town, Dr. Sarah Chen was already 3 steps ahead of the invasion. In her underground quantum research lab at Caltech, she watched as her experimental quantum entanglement detector went haywire. The readings made no sense, unless you understood that consciousness itself had quantum properties. Dr. Chen, her assistant, burst through the door. "The entire campus is dark, and there are strange ships in the sky. Look at this." Sarah pointed to her old analog oscilloscope, its green line dancing wildly. "Their energy dampening field. It's creating quantum fluctuations. They're not just shutting down our technology. They're trying to suppress human consciousness itself." She smiled, recognizing a fatal flaw in their strategy. But they don't understand how human awareness actually works. As panic erupted in the streets above, Sarah grabbed her notebook and a pencil. Sometimes, the oldest methods were the best. Her fingers flew across the paper, sketching diagrams and equations. The aliens' technology was advanced, yes, but it was based on a fundamental misunderstanding of consciousness. They thought awareness was digital, on or off, active or suppressed. But human consciousness was analog, flowing like water, finding new paths when blocked. Maya's camcorder captured the first attack. Silent beams of light that froze people in place, their eyes wide but empty. But she noticed something odd. Those who were sleeping or meditating seemed unaffected. Those lost in creative activities, a street artist painting, a musician playing an acoustic guitar, they stayed conscious too. Through her lens, Maya documented everything. When the beam struck her house, she felt the strange pressure in her mind, but her focus on filming, on creating, kept her awareness intact. She understood now why her camera still worked. The aliens hadn't bothered to suppress primitive analog technology. Dr. Chen's calculations confirmed it. The Xeraxians could dampen digital systems and structured thought, but they couldn't suppress human creativity and intuition. In trying to shut down human consciousness, they'd revealed its greatest strength, its ability to flow around obstacles, to find new ways of expressing itself. The invasion's first hour was ending, but humanity's resistance was already taking shape, documented by a teenage content creator's old camcorder and understood by a quantum physicist's pencil and paper. The aliens thought they had shut down human civilization. Instead, they had forced humanity to remember its most powerful tools: creativity, adaptability, and the strength of an analog soul in a digital age. Kevin Jong slumped in the corner of his grandfather's cluttered radio room, watching the old man fiddle with dials and switches on his ham radio setup. Any other day, he'd be scrolling through his phone, but now the black screen just reminded him of everything they'd lost. Outside, The alien ships loomed in the darkening sky, their hulls shimmering with that strange, headache-inducing pattern. "See, what did I tell you about keeping the old ways alive?" Grandpa John's eyes twinkled as he adjusted the frequency knob. The radio crackled with static, but it worked. Digital is convenient, but analog is reliable. Kevin rolled his eyes, then stopped as a voice emerged from the static. "CQ, CQ. This is KX3YZ in Portland. Anyone receiving? We've got ships over the city. Power's out, but we're organizing." "Holy shit," Kevin whispered, earning a sharp look from his grandfather. "Sorry, but Grandpa, we're not alone." More voices filtered through. Reports from Seattle, Vancouver, Phoenix. The ham radio network was alive, a web of voices sharing information about the invasion. Kevin grabbed his notebook, writing everything down in the coding shorthand he used for programming projects. "Wait," he sat up straight. "Grandpa, remember how you taught me about World War II radio encryption last summer? What if we combine that with modern coding patterns?" Grandpa John's eyes lit up. "Two languages the aliens won't understand, old and new together. Kevin, my boy, I think you're onto something." Over the next hour, they developed their system. Kevin translated his grandfather's traditional radio codes into a hybrid cipher, using programming logic to create patterns that looked like random interference. They shared their method across the frequencies, and soon a new kind of resistance network bloomed. Through the encrypted channels, they learned about Maya Rodriguez's footage from Los Angeles, about Dr. Chen's quantum discoveries. Kevin's coding scheme helped organize the information into a coherent picture. The aliens could suppress advanced technology, but they ignored anything they considered obsolete. "Shanghai reporting." A heavily accented voice cut through the static. "We've got a message from a quantum physicist in California. Something about consciousness and analog waves. Can anyone decode the technical language?" Kevin grinned. 3 years of computer science classes were finally paying off, but in a way he'd never expected. "Pass it through," he said into the microphone. "I speak quantum." As midnight approached, their radio room had transformed into a command center. Maps covered the walls, marked with ship positions and active radio nodes. Kevin's notebook was filled with decoded messages, each one a piece of the puzzle. His grandfather handled the traditional operators, while Kevin coordinated with younger hams who understood his coding shortcuts. "Message from Dr. Chen," Kevin announced, decoding the latest transmission. "The aliens aren't just blocking technology. They're trying to suppress human consciousness itself. But get this, they can only block structured, digital-style thinking. Art, music, meditation, anything flowing and creative slips right through." Grandpa John nodded slowly. "Like the difference between digital and analog signals. Digital is precise, structured, easy to block. But analog bleeds through," Kevin finished. "It finds the gaps." He looked at their radio setup with new appreciation. Those old analog signals weren't just carrying information. They were proof that humanity couldn't be shut down like a computer. A new transmission crackled through. Someone in Prague was organizing a resistance network of classical musicians. In Sydney, indigenous Dreamtime stories were helping people maintain consciousness through the alien suppression field. And in Los Angeles, a teenage girl with an old camcorder was documenting it all. Kevin's fingers flew across his notebook, coding and decoding messages. For the first time since the invasion, he felt real hope. The aliens had tried to silence humanity, but they'd never understood what his grandfather had taught him. Sometimes the oldest paths were the strongest, and the future belonged to those who could bridge the old ways with the new. Jimmy Park's fingers danced across his mechanical keyboard as he guided his virtual fleet through the space battle in Stellar Conquest IV. His Twitch stream had gone dark with everything else, but he kept playing, muscle memory keeping him focused even as alien ships prowled the sky outside his apartment. Then he saw it, the pattern. The same exact fleet movement he'd seen thousands of times in-game was now playing out in the real sky above Seoul. His hands froze on the keyboard. "No way," he whispered, pressing his face against the window. The alien ships moved in perfect formation, executing a pincer maneuver that any competitive gamer would recognize. It was the Nova Crush strategy, a notorious tactic from the game's eye. Jimmy grabbed his old Nintendo DS, one of the few electronic devices still working, and started recording the ship's movements. After 20 minutes, he had confirmation. The aliens weren't just using similar tactics, they were using exact movesets from Stellar Conquest IV. Through the ham radio network he'd learned about from Kevin Jong's broadcasts, Jimmy made contact with other pro gamers. Yuki from Tokyo confirmed seeing the Stellar Storm formation. Maria in Sao Paulo recognized the Diamond Defense pattern. Every alien fleet movement corresponded to a documented game strategy. "They must have found our games during their reconnaissance," Jimmy explained over the radio. "Thought they were military simulations, but they don't understand. Games aren't perfect. They're meant to be beaten." Within hours, Jimmy had assembled a task force of the world's top Stellar Conquest players. They set up in an abandoned PC bang, using paper and pencils to map out strategies. The alien eye was sophisticated but predictable. It followed the game's patterns perfectly, which meant it had the same weaknesses as the game's eye. "Look," Jimmy pointed to his hastily drawn diagram. "They're using the Cosmic Vice formation. In the game, it's nearly perfect, but it has one flaw. It can't adapt to irregular counter movements. That's why speedrunners always break it with random trajectories." The radio crackled with Dr. Chen's voice from California. "Your discovery supports my quantum consciousness theory. Their AI thinks in binary, predictable patterns, but human gaming instincts are analog, creative. We see patterns but adapt them unpredictably." Jimmy smiled. Every hour spent practicing game strategies, every tournament lost and won, every seemingly useless bit of gaming knowledge was becoming Earth's secret weapon. The aliens had copied human military simulations perfectly, but they'd copy our training tools, not our actual combat capabilities. Through Kevin's coded radio network, Jimmy's team began distributing counter strategies. They taught military pilots to think like speedrunners, to use glitch-like maneuvers that the aliens' perfect but rigid formations couldn't handle. Every unbeatable alien tactic had a counter that gamers had discovered through thousands of hours of play. They made a classic newbie mistake, Jimmy told his team as they watched their strategies play out in the sky above. They studied the meta but forgot that the meta always changes. They learned our patterns but not our ability to break them. The aliens had expected to face military doctrine, and found themselves instead battling the collective knowledge of millions of gamers who had spent years finding ways to break perfect systems. Their flawless formations were being undone by strategies born in teenage bedrooms and internet cafes, by players who had turned finding exploits into an art form. As night fell over Seoul, Jimmy watched Earth's first successful counterattack through his window. The military jets moved in chaotic, unpredictable patterns, using maneuvers that would get you banned in competitive play. But against the aliens' perfect, predictable strategies, humanity's cheap tactics were turning the tide. "GGEZ," Jimmy muttered with a smile, marking another successful defense on his paper map. The aliens had chosen the game, but they'd never learned the first rule of gaming. The perfect strategy only works until someone finds a way to break it. Mrs. Patel squinted at the quantum equations Dr. Chen had sent through the ham radio network, her arthritis-curved fingers tracing the familiar shapes of molecular structures. After 40 years of teaching chemistry, she could read chemical bonds like other people read morning newspapers. "Sodium lauryl sulfate," she murmured, tapping the paper. "Common soap molecules. But look here, Priya dear, see how they interact with the quantum field." She gestured to her granddaughter, who'd been recording everything in her chemistry notebook. Priya, fresh out of medical school, leaned over the equations. The alien shields, they're vulnerable to simple soap compounds. Not just any soap. Mrs. Puddle smiled, pulling out her grandmother's recipe box. We need the right molecular structure. Pure, handmade soap with specific crystal patterns. The kind your great-grandmother taught me to make in Mumbai. The Sunshine Valley Retirement Community's recreation room transformed into a makeshift laboratory. Mrs. Patel gathered her fellow retired teachers, chemists, physicists, engineers, all armed with decades of knowledge and free from the aliens' digital suppression. Add the lye slowly, she instructed Mr. Thompson, a former high school physics teacher. We want perfect crystallization. Their soap-making operation looked more like a scene from an old-fashioned apothecary than a weapons facility. Through Kevin Jung's coded radio network, they received updates from Dr. Chen. The quantum equations confirmed what Mrs. Patel had suspected. The alien shields worked by creating perfect, symmetrical energy patterns. But soap molecules, with their unique amphipathic structure, could disrupt that symmetry. It's like washing dishes, Mrs. Pottle explained to the military officers who'd come to investigate the strange reports of effective homemade weapons. Soap breaks down barriers between water and oil. Our quantum soap breaks down barriers between normal space and their shield frequencies. The officers looked skeptical until Mrs. Pottle demonstrated. She loaded a bubble gun, borrowed from her youngest great-grandchild, with their special soap solution. The iridescent bubble floated up and touched an alien sensor probe. The device's shield flickered and failed. Production ramped up. Every retirement home in the network began manufacturing quantum soap using Mrs. Patel's precise instructions. The aliens, for all their advanced technology, never thought to scan for weapons coming from senior living communities. My arthritis acts up when the shield frequency changes, Mrs. Watson, an 82-year-old former math teacher, announced one morning. Her observation led to another breakthrough. They could detect alien shield modifications by monitoring their joint pain. The invaders' perfect technology was being countered by human bodies' natural sensitivity to quantum fluctuations. The first major test came when an alien patrol approached the retirement community. The residents waited in their rocking chairs, bubble guns disguised as breathing apparatus. Mrs. Patel gave the signal, and dozens of iridescent bubbles filled the air. The alien shields dissolved like sugar in hot tea. Their perfect formations broke as they retreated from what their sensors must have registered as harmless water vapor. They never saw Mrs. Patel's satisfied smile as she recorded the results in her floral-covered notebook. My grandmother always said soap purifies more than just the body, she told Priya that evening as they prepared another batch. She said it cleanses the spirit. I don't think she imagined we'd be cleansing Earth of alien invaders, but she would have appreciated the poetry. Through the radio network, reports flowed in. Quantum soap production was spreading worldwide. Traditional soap makers in Aleppo, artisanal crafters in France, and indigenous healers in Peru all added their knowledge to the formula. The aliens' perfect shields were being undone by one of humanity's oldest inventions, improved by centuries of grandmother's wisdom. Mrs. Patel began each new batch with a prayer her grandmother had taught her, mixing ancient wisdom with modern physics. Sometimes the best weapons came from remembering what we'd known all along, that the simplest solutions were often the strongest, and that grandmother's wisdom should never be underestimated. Maria Delgado stood in the empty Milan Opera House, her voice soaring to the rafters as she held a perfect high C. Through her closed eyes, she sensed the alien patrol ship passing overhead, and felt the moment its neural network wavered. Did you see that? Thor Thunderthroat. Anderson stopped tuning his guitar. The massive death metal vocalist had arrived yesterday through the underground network. His band's equipment carried piece by piece through Europe's back roads. The ship's lights flickered when you hit that note. Maria opened her eyes, a smile spreading across her face. Dr. Chen was right. They process sound as pure mathematics. They have no defense against music carried by human emotion. The unlikely duo had connected through Kevin Jung's radio network. Maria's perfect pitch matched frequencies that disrupted alien neural patterns, while Thor's guttural vocals created subsonic vibrations that interfered with their ship's stabilizers. Apart, they were curious anomalies. Together, they were a weapon. We need more range. Maria studied the opera house's acoustic design. The aliens analyzed sound for mathematical patterns, but human music, it's ordered chaos. Mathematics with soul. Thor grinned, his metal band's logo tattoo crinkling on his neck. Then let's give them a symphony they'll never forget. They spent the next day arranging a piece that combined Maria's operatic expertise with Thor's metal techniques. The opera house's ancient acoustic architecture would amplify their sound naturally, no electronic equipment needed. Through the Resistance Network, they learned of other musicians making similar discoveries. A classical quartet in Vienna had disabled an alien ground patrol with Beethoven's Fifth. Aboriginal songlines in Australia were creating safe zones where alien tech couldn't function. Every culture's music carried frequencies that disrupted different parts of the alien systems. It's like Mrs. Patel's quantum soap, Maria explained to the growing group of musicians gathering in the opera house. We're not just making sound. We're creating quantum vibrations that resonate with human consciousness. The first coordinated attack came at sunset. As alien ships moved into position above Milan, Maria began the aria from Puccini's Turandot. Her voice soared pure and clear, making the aliens' neural networks flicker. Then Thor's band joined in, their precise chaos turning the classical piece into something entirely new. The effect was immediate. Alien ships wavered, their perfect formations breaking as their crews struggled to process music that followed mathematical rules while simultaneously breaking them. Through their targeting scopes, they saw only a handful of humans making noise. Their sensors couldn't detect the quantum resonance building in the opera house's ancient stones, amplified by centuries of acoustic engineering. More musicians joined in. A jazz saxophonist improvised between Maria's soaring notes. A Tuvan throat singer added otherworldly overtones. Each new element made the sound more complex, more human, more impossible for the alien systems to process. The ships retreated, their shields rippling with conflicting frequencies. In their wake, they left behind disabled sensors and scrambled communication arrays, all destroyed by nothing more than the ordered chaos of human music. Maria caught her breath, her throat raw but her eyes shining. They tried to shut down human consciousness, she said to Thor as they watched the ships flee. But they never understood that music isn't just patterns of sound. It's the space between the notes, the emotions we pour into each phrase, the soul we give to the mathematics. Through Kevin's network, they shared their discovery, the exact combinations of notes, rhythms, and emotional resonance that proved most effective. Soon, concert halls and underground clubs across the world became bases of resistance. Classical orchestras performed alongside metal bands, folk musicians joined electronic artists, and every combination created new weapons against the alien neural networks. The aliens had expected to find a species bound by mathematical laws. Instead, they found one that turned mathematics into art, that wielded emotions as weapons, and that could shake the foundations of reality with nothing more than the human voice raised in song. Lai Wei adjusted her vintage Polaroid camera, making sure Maya Rodriguez's resistance footage would be clearly visible in the background of her next makeup tutorial. The aliens might have shut down digital networks, but they couldn't stop teenagers from sharing physical photographs or the coded messages hidden within them. Today we're going to learn about the perfect cat eyeliner, she announced to her gathered team of former influencers, now resistance communications experts. Notice how the wing curves up sharply, just like the alien patrol routes over Shanghai at midnight. The power of social media hadn't died with the internet. Instead, it had evolved. Wei's network of beauty bloggers, dance crews, and street artists had transformed into an intelligent sharing system that the aliens couldn't crack. Every dance move contained military intel. Every piece of street art marked safe houses and resistance strongholds. Through Kevin Jung's radio network, Wei learned that her methods were spreading. In Mexico City, street dancers incorporated alien ship movements into their choreography, teaching civilians how to predict patrol patterns. Paris fashion designers created clothing lines where the patterns subtly mapped alien weaknesses discovered by Dr. Chen. Remember, Wei demonstrated a new eyeshadow technique, blend in 3 directions, like Mrs. Patel's quantum soap formula. Her students nodded, memorizing the movements that would be shared through underground dance clubs and secret makeup tutorials. The aliens' AI constantly scanned for military communications, but ignored the seemingly frivolous human behaviors. They didn't understand that a viral dance challenge could spread battle plans faster than any official briefing, or that teenage slang could evolve into an uncrackable code overnight. Wei's greatest breakthrough came when she combined forces with Maria Delgado's musical resistance. They created dance routines that not only shared intelligence, but also generated disruptive frequencies when performed in groups. Flash mobs became tactical strikes, their synchronized movements creating quantum resonance patterns that interfered with alien sensors. The beauty of human communication, Wei explained to a resistance leader, is that it's never just one thing. A dance is movement, but it's also rhythm, story, and community. Aliens try to categorize everything, but humans naturally layer meaning. The first major test came during what appeared to be a spontaneous street festival. Hundreds of young people gathered, seemingly just dancing and sharing makeup tips. The alien sensors registered only harmless social behavior, until the entire crowd performed Wei's latest viral challenge. The synchronized movement, combined with the quantum frequencies hidden in their synchronized chants, created a cascading disruption effect. Alien ships above Shanghai found their navigation systems scrambled by what their sensors insisted was nothing more than human recreational activity. Wei captured it all on her Polaroid, creating physical evidence that would spread through the underground network. Each photo contained layers of coded information: the positioning of dancers showing patrol patterns, makeup choices indicating shield frequencies, and fashion accessories marking resistance supply routes. They think human social networks are primitive, Wei told her team as they prepared another coded dance tutorial. They analyze our digital technology, but ignore how we actually connect. They don't understand that humans have been sharing complex information through dance, art, and fashion since before we had written language. Through the radio network, reports confirmed that Wei's methods were being adapted worldwide. Brazilian carnival dancers coordinated resistance movements through their performances. Japanese Harajuku fashion became a visual code for tracking alien weaknesses. Even children's playground games evolved to share intelligence about alien patrol patterns. The aliens had disabled humanity's digital networks, expecting to cripple our communication. Instead, they forced us to remember that human connection runs deeper than technology. Every trend, meme, and viral challenge became a weapon, proving that the most powerful social network wasn't digital. It was the unbreakable human drive to share, create, and connect. Marcus Jefferson wiped sweat from his brow as he tended to the vertical gardens climbing up the abandoned office building's walls. What started as his rooftop garden had spread across 20 floors, turning corporate glass and steel into a living greenhouse. Below him, New York City had gone dark, but his gardens thrived in the alien-occupied metropolis. "The tomatoes are ready," his daughter Zara called from the hydroponic setup they'd engineered from old water cooler bottles and salvaged pipes. At 13, she'd become the resident expert on calculating nutrient ratios, treating each plant like a science experiment. Through Kevin Jung's radio network, they'd learned they weren't alone. Urban farmers worldwide were turning dead cities into living gardens. The aliens had expected to starve humanity into submission by disrupting supply chains and industrial agriculture. Instead, they'd forced humans to remember how to grow food anywhere. "Look at this." Marcus showed Zora a message passed through Wei's dance code network. Rooftop farmers in Singapore found that certain plants disrupt alien sensor readings. something about the quantum properties of photosynthesis that Dr. Chen's been studying. Their building had become more than a food source. It was a living laboratory. They discovered that dense gardens of certain species created dead zones in alien scanning patterns. The invader sensors, designed to detect electronic and mechanical signatures, were baffled by the complex biological signals of intertwined plant life. Mrs. Patel's quantum soap research team had started collaborating with urban farmers, studying how plant molecules could enhance their shield-disrupting compounds. The aliens, who relied on synthesized nutrients, couldn't comprehend the complex relationship between human survival and living plants. "It's like you always said about companion planting," Zora commented, recording growth rates in her notebook. "Everything's connected. Tomatoes help the peppers grow better, marigolds keep the pests away, and now we find out they all help shield us from alien detection." The knowledge spread through the resistance networks. Indigenous farming techniques from the Amazon proved remarkably effective at creating sustainable food systems in alien-occupied zones. Korean natural farming methods helped urban growers maximize production in tight spaces. Every culture's agricultural wisdom found new purpose in the resistance. Maria Delgado's musical resistance teams discovered that plants responded to certain frequencies, growing faster and stronger when exposed to specific harmonies. Soon, every urban garden included a rotation of musicians, their songs nourishing both the crops and the human spirit. The first major test came when alien patrols detected unusual energy patterns from their building. Marcus watched through the dense foliage as alien scouts approached. But their sensors, confused by the overlapping biological signatures and quantum disruption from the plants, registered the building as an anomaly of organic decay. "They're looking for straight lines and clear signals," Marcus explained to the growing community of refugee farmers they'd taken in. "But nature doesn't grow in straight lines. Life is messy, adaptive, and interconnected. Everything their perfect systems can't process." Through Wei's network, they shared videos disguised as gardening tutorials, teaching others how to create these living shields. Every window box and rooftop garden became part of humanity's defense. The aliens had overwhelming technological superiority, but they couldn't overcome humanity's ancient partnership with the natural world. Marcus stood on his rooftop at sunset, watching the alien ships patrol between the skyscrapers. Around him, tomatoes ripened and beans climbed salvaged trellises. In the greenhouse, Zara led a class on hydroponics for newly arrived refugees, passing on knowledge that was both ancient and revolutionary. "The aliens thought they could starve us out," he told his growing community over dinner. "Fresh vegetables and bread baked in solar ovens. But they didn't understand that humans can grow food in concrete cracks, that we've spent millennia learning to nurture life in the harshest conditions. They may have taken our technology, but they can't take our connection to the earth itself." Dr. Sarah Chen stood in Marcus Jefferson's rooftop garden, watching the sunset paint the alien ships in golden light. Around her, humanity's disparate resistance efforts were coming together for one final push. The moment they'd all been waiting for had arrived. "The quantum readings are perfect," she told the gathered leaders of the resistance. "Their ships are positioned exactly where Jimmy's gamers predicted. We couldn't have planned this better." Through Kevin Jung's radio network, coordinated by his grandfather's old ham radio, the signal went out worldwide. In every occupied city, humans prepared for what they dubbed Operation Harmony, a symphony of everything that made humanity unique. Maya Rodriguez, her old camcorder ready, positioned herself to document what would become history. "Operation Harmony, Phase 1, she narrated. "Time to show them what humanity can really do." It began with music. Maria Delgado and Thor Anderson led a worldwide concert. Their combined classical metal performance carried through the ancient acoustics of opera houses and cathedrals. The sound waves, amplified by the architecture humans had perfected over centuries, created the first layer of disruption in the aliens' neural networks. Lai Wei's dance crews took to the streets, their movements synchronized across continents. Each step, each gesture contained coded intelligence gathered by her network of social observers. The alien's eye, trying to analyze the patterns, found itself overwhelmed by the layers of meaning humans could pack into a single movement. In Mrs. Patel's retirement community, and in similar communities worldwide, elderly chemists and craftspeople activated their quantum soap formula. The bubbles rose into the evening air, their seemingly simple molecular structure carrying the complexity of generations of human knowledge. The alien ships responded exactly as Jimmy Park had predicted, falling into the defensive patterns he'd seen countless times in Stellar Conquest IV. But humanity was ready. Military pilots, trained by gamers in the art of exploiting predictable AI, broke their perfect formations with maneuvers too creative and chaotic for the aliens to counter. Marcus's urban gardens provided cover, their dense biological signatures creating shadows in alien scanning patterns. Through these natural shields, resistance fighters moved unseen, carrying Mrs. Patel's quantum soap to strategic locations. The aliens, masters of technology, but disconnected from the natural world, never saw them coming. Dr. Chen watched her quantum readings spike as all these elements synchronized. The aliens' perfect technology, faced with the beautiful chaos of human creativity, began to fail. Their shields, designed to resist technological attacks, had no defense against soap bubbles carrying quantum disruptions. Their neural networks, programmed for mathematical precision, crashed when trying to process music that followed rules while breaking them. Maya's camera captured the moment the first alien ship retreated. Through Kevin's network, similar reports flooded in from around the world. The aliens were withdrawing, their perfect systems undone by the messy, creative, impossibly human resistance. They never understood, Dr. Chen told Maya's camera as the ships fled Earth's atmosphere. They thought consciousness was just computation, that culture was inefficient, that art was wasteful. They tried to shut down our technology, but they couldn't shut down what makes us human. In the days that followed, humanity rebuilt. Digital networks came back online, but people kept the old ham radios working. Vertical gardens continued to green the cities. Opera houses hosted metal concerts, and social media influencers taught ancient wisdom through modern means. The aliens had tried to conquer Earth by imposing perfect order. Instead, they'd reminded humanity that its greatest strength lay in embracing chaos, in finding beauty in imperfection, and in combining the old with the new in ways that no perfect system could predict. Maya's final documentary, pieced together from her camcorder footage, became Earth's most watched history lesson. It showed more than just humanity's victory. It showed why they'd won. Not through superior technology or military might, but through the uniquely human ability to create, to adapt, and to find strength in the very things their enemies thought were weaknesses. Earth's reputation spread across the galaxy. Never attack a species that turns soap into quantum weapons, that defeats military AI with game strategies, that protects itself with gardens and music, and that carries its ancient wisdom into the future. Humanity had proven that civilization's greatest strength isn't in its technology, but in remembering what makes it human.